Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books, including my latest, and I got a copy this time, NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction. I hope everyone's having a good week. Thanksgiving's right around the corner. I can't believe it. Before we get going with this week's story, let's go to the true crime section of the New York Post. New York City Mayor Eric Adams named former sanitation boss, Jessica Tisch, permanent NYPD police commissioner. Longtime public servant Jessica Tisch will serve as the NYPD's next permanent police commissioner, Mayor Eric Adams announced on Wednesday. Tisch, the city's sanitation commissioner and NYPD veteran, will start her job on Monday. We believe they need a full-time leader who is dedicated to spend every minute of the day keeping us safe. Listen, I did 20 years with the NYPD. I have no idea who this person is. I saw her photo. I didn't recognize her. To me, sounds like a political hack. We'll see. I memean, she was with the New York City Police Department, so I'm hoping she has a background. I'd love to know how many arrests she made. This one, I just caught this story before we went live. Hero cop who gunned down violent career criminal after getting shot is wheeled out of a New York City hospital to rousing applause. NYPD police officer Richard Wong, a 7-year veteran of the force, took a bullet to the thigh from ex-con Gary Worthy after the thug pulled off a pair of armed robberies in Jamaica, but managed to get off fatal shots that stopped the crime spree, police said. The fatal confrontation came about an hour later when Wong confronted Worthy near the corner of Jamaica Avenue and East 160th Street, with the ex-con opening fire and striking the cop and a bystander. Despite being wounded, the hero cop fired a shot and struck Worthy in the face. He was pronounced dead at the scene. You got to see what this guy looks like. It's worth it just to go to the New York Post website and pull up the photo of the perp. He looks like something out of Hollywood. And again, career criminal, running around with a handgun. This is an ironic story. A Venezuelan migrant, illegal alien, with links to Tren de Agua has been arrested for allegedly robbing a Manhattan district attorney in has been arrested for allegedly robbing one of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecutors in her apartment building after she busted him masturbating, police told the Post on Wednesday. Brandon Somoza, 25 years old, with apparent ties to the vicious prison gang, was nabbed outside the Row Hotel migrant shelter in Midtown Manhattan Tuesday night over the sick ordeal, sources said. Well, let's see. You think he gets out on bail? Or do you think that they're just going to, or you think they're going to hold him on a higher bail? I would like to see what happens with that case. Chances are they're going to hold him on bail because it's one of Bragg's own prosecutors, where everyone else can go kick rocks and pound sand. The suspected madman behind a deadly stabbing spree in Manhattan Monday has a long criminal history, you think, and had just walked free from Rikers Island a month before the terrifying attacks, the Post learned. Ramon Rivera, identified by sources as a person of interest in the bloodbath, was released from jail October 7th. Recent burglary and assault convictions after spending most of his year behind bars, sources said. The release perplexed Mayor Eric Adams, who said NYPD investigators were looking into how a career criminal with a history of mental illness could walk free despite his recent convictions. I mean, is this guy kidding me? He should really wake up and smell the Bustelo. New York City is just kind of going down the hill and into the pits. So this week, well, let me go into exactly what I'm going to do today. I know two women that grew up in Illinois, specifically the Downers Grove area. And both of them had mentioned to me, since I worked in law enforcement, did you ever hear of Bruce Lindahl? He was a serial killer. He was from my area. And I said, no. And they brought it up a couple of times. I thought nothing of it. And then a couple of weeks ago, there was a story that broke that a 45-year-old homicide in that area had just been solved through DNA. And it linked to this guy, Bruce Lindahl, and they showed his photo, and the guys just had like these piercing eyes, and I said, this is pretty interesting. So I bought the book, and the name of the book is called Murder in the Fox Valley, The True Story of Serial Killer Bruce Lindahl. It's about a 150-page book. It's a very interesting read. It goes into this lifestyle and all this crazy stuff. So I actually contacted the author of this book, Jim Ridings, after I read it, and I wanted to have him on as a guest of the show. And earlier today, we tried recording it, but there was some glitches on his end, and I really wasn't able to pull it off. So and he was a great guy, great guest, great author, but I'm just going to try to wing it. So it's the late 1970s, and in this area called Downers Grove in the Fox Valley region. It's about 30 miles from Chicago. Looks like, the whole area was a nice neighborhood. And you've got this guy, Bruce Lindahl, and he's a serial killer. And basically, it's one of these things, they should make a movie about it, because the guy was like a great white shark. From the time this guy woke up in the morning until the time he went to bed, he seemed to have the energy of an infant, and he just preyed and harassed women. He killed them, he raped them, tormented them, and God forbid he was dating them, he beat them. And it just seemed like people were going to the police and all these little police departments in this Fox Valley, and nobody did a thing about it. But what put him on the playing field was, I think it was right around 79 or 80, you had this woman by the name of Deborah Colliander, and she was a dietitian at this hospital, and she actually knew the author of this book. He went undercover at this nursing home where this dietitian worked, and he was trying to expose how the patients were being abused and overcharged, I guess, and he actually met this woman, Deborah Colliander. Well, she's coming home from work one day. This guy, Bruce Lindahl, gets a hold of her, gets her into his house, rapes her, and he falls asleep. Well, she wakes up naked, runs out of the house. She goes a couple of doors down. She pounds on the door. This woman who had two daughters actually lets her into the house. She tells her, I was just raped. I don't know what to do. And as she's, the woman gave her some clothes and called 911. The woman had two young daughters that said, that sounds like the way you describe the house and the cars, that sounds like Bruce down the block. He's always trying to get us to go into the house. The police show up. And if I'm reading it correctly, there's a cop involved in this who actually sold Bruce Lindahl his house. And he shows up and he says, oh, I know Bruce. They get Bruce out of the house. Bruce goes down to the police department. He gives a statement. He's arrested for rape. I mean, it's a slam dunk case. They recover firearms. He pointed a firearm at her. They recover the firearm. It's not boyfriend, girlfriend. It's a credible witness. Somehow, some way, this guy gets out on $4,000 bail. And what winds up happening is, just before the case goes to trial, a couple of months later, Deborah Colliander vanishes. And nobody can find where she is. And immediately, Bruce Lindahl's attorney files a petition for speedy trial, because the serial killer knows she's not going to show up for trial because he took care of her. And actually what winds up happening is her body turns up later. So anyway, this guy Bruce Lindahl, he's like a, how do I explain him? He's a dirtbag. He never really holds a job. He has menial jobs. He works in a supermarket. He worked at a movie theater. He was teaching automotive. Can't hold a job. When he does have the occasional girlfriend, he mooches off of them and torments them. There's one girl that, oh my God, he raped her multiple times. He carjacked her multiple times. And she keeps going to the police, and she keeps filing police reports. And the cops keep calling her back and going, you sure you want to press charges? And she's like, yes. Nothing's ever done with it. At one point, he dresses up as a meter reader because he worked for a gas company for a short time, and I guess he still had the uniform. So one of the ways he was able to gain access, he was also a burglar to people's homes, is he would knock on the door, find a woman that was alone or an elderly person and say, oh, yeah, I'm a meter reader. I got to check on your meter. And then depending on who the person was, sometimes he'd rape them. Other times he would burglarize the home. And there's so many weird instances with this guy. So he's also he belongs to a skydiving club. And there's a person that's in his skydiving club who dies. His parachute doesn't open, or the strings were cut. I don't really know exactly what happened. But Bruce Lindahl, wherever this guy is, there are people dying of suspicious circumstances. So one of the quotes from this book that I found enjoyable and I got a kick out of was from the author. It says, "Evil keeps destroying before it destroys itself." So what happens is you've got this girl that's missing now. She was raped. She's missing. Police reports are starting to come in. They're not really doing anything with this guy. Bruce Lindahl goes to a bowling alley. And he's now here's a guy 28 years old. He's hanging around a bowling alley where you got 14 to 18-year-olds. You know, he's 10 years past that, but he's hanging around. And he convinces this young man, Charles Huber, who's 18 years old. He was about to turn 18. He says, "Listen, my car won't start. Can you give me a ride home? I'd really appreciate it." And by all accounts, this kid was a good kid. Never been in trouble. Was very helpful, according to all accounts. This kid, Huber, gives serial killer Bruce Lindahl a ride home to his apartment, and somehow he gets him in the apartment. And it's a tiny apartment, and in the apartment there's a small bedroom where his girlfriend is supposedly sleeping. Well, at one point, this thing goes sideways, and Bruce Lindahl pulls out a knife and starts stabbing this 18-year-old kid inside the apartment. Violent struggle, blood all over the place. But what winds up happening is Bruce Lindahl is killing this kid. He nicks his own femoral artery. So according to the girlfriend, she gets up to use the bathroom. She claims she was drunk. She gets up to go to the bathroom, in the middle of the night. She sees two bodies. She turns on the lights. She starts making phone calls. She didn't call the police first. She started calling other people. Police show up. You've got two dead young men on the floor. So now the cops start their investigation, and they start going backwards, and they start discovering that, you know what? Maybe Bruce Lindahl is involved in a bunch of these rapes and murders. Then you have a victim that comes forward, and she tells the police, and this centers around the Aurora. There's other police departments involved in this, but the Aurora Police Department is criminally negligent. They really are. You have one victim that reports a rape to the Aurora police. She tells them it's Bruce Lindahl, and Bruce Lindahl at one point tells her while he's raping her, goes, "You can go to the cops. They're not going to do anything about it. I used to live with a cop." And he did have a buddy who sold him the house. And in this book, at one point, this cop lends Bruce Lindahl his bulletproof vest because he's getting death threats with the rape case hanging over his head. And what I just find astonishing is all these police departments in this area, they all know about this guy, but nobody's doing anything about it. No one's getting a task force together. Nobody's surveilling him 24/7. No one's putting pressure on him. And, I mean, all right, so I grew up in the Bronx. If there was a guy running around like that, the mob would have chopped his hands off, okay? But let's just say there's no mafia. I can tell you for sure in my neighborhood, if someone was going around doing this to women and screwing around with some guy's sister, you would have had a couple of guys baseball batted him like multiple times. If he would have lived, he would have been having his meals through a straw. I just don't see how this guy was able to get away with these things. So there's a chapter in the book called "How Many Women Did Bruce Lindahl Kill?" And according to the reporter, probably 12 to 15, but they might be more. And what's telling is when they did a search warrant in this guy's house after he died, they started finding photographs that belonged to other victims that turned up dead later on. So no one's really going to know how many people this guy's responsible for. After he died, what I find ironic is they exhumed his body for DNA and they removed his head, his knuckles, and his femur. So I kind of thought that was good considering no one else got a peaceful death and this guy's body's getting disturbed for all these criminal cases. The cops went to his brother after all, the brother that put up $4,000 bail to get his DNA so they wouldn't have to exhume the body. Less than cooperative, wouldn't cooperate. I asked the author, since firearms were used in a couple of these homicides, and he did point a gun at a couple of these women, were the weapons tested for ballistics? Well, a couple of firearms somehow mysteriously vanished from the Aurora Police Department's evidence room. And during this time, and here's another wild story with this book. During this time period, you got another killer running around, and this guy's name is Raymond Scoville, Scoville. Guy was a creep, owned a record store. He's 24 years old. He hooks up with a 14-year-old. He's with her a couple of years. She's an adult now. They own the record store together. They have a falling out because he's embezzling money from the record store, and he kills the girlfriend and posts bail, and he's a fugitive to this day. And at one point during the investigation, the cops, I mean, they just did such a shitty job with this case. I hate to say it coming from a law enforcement background, but when you see things like that, it's like you just want to shake them. At one point, psychics start approaching the cops trying to find this woman, Deborah Colliander's body. And this one psychic is just leading them on a wild goose chase. And the reporter actually spent time with him. And from all accounts, the psychic sounds like a total scumbag. Psychic was a dead end. And I think I said this on the podcast when I was a young cop. I saw a phone number for a psychic, and I asked the detective about it. And he goes, that's the thing. He says, if you call one of these people, he goes, that's like the last resort, because if you call one of these people, you got to do a DD5, you got to do a report on it, and that's going to go in the folder. And later on, if you do make an arrest and a defense attorney gets a hold of that and says, yeah, you're supposed to be this seasoned detective, you did all your due diligence, and you're contacting psychics. So it would definitely muddy the waters in a criminal investigation, that if it ever went to trial. There is a theory with this guy, Bruce Lindahl, that he was involved in a pornography ring. And the reason is, after he died, they found tons and tons and tons of photographs in his house. And back then, I mean, late 70s, early 80s, it's a different world. And you would either take a roll of film and you would drop it off somewhere, or you would mail it to one of these places that would develop it for you. And some of these photos of women he took apparently were drugged and in compromising positions. So back then, in the late 70s, early 80s, somebody would have called the police. And not only that, this guy never really had two nickels to rub together. So the equipment and all the film, which cost money back then, wasn't digital. So where'd the money come from? They have a theory that somebody he was involved in, possibly with this pornography ring, had a dark room, which makes sense to me that the negatives could be developed without having to worry about prying eyes dropping a dime on him. So another aspect of this, I'm reading these stories, is you have several police departments in this area, Aurora, Naperville, but then I see Bollingsbrook Police Department. And I'm thinking to myself, Bollingsbrook, where do I know that place from? And then it dawned on me. I don't know if you guys remember this. It happened just around the time I retired, probably about 2007. Drew Peterson. You had that cop. I think he retired as a sergeant from the Bollingsbrook Police Department. He killed two of his wives. His latest wife he couldn't find missing. He was the guy, he had to be the smartest guy in the room, like CNN and everybody, Fox News. They camped in front of his house. And he seemed like he didn't have a care in the world. He's telling people his young wife ran off and left him with these two kids, and he's the victim, and yada, yada, yada. Ultimately, they never found the second wife's body, but he was convicted of it. Or maybe he was convicted in the first wife. I know the first wife died, supposedly drowned, supposedly in her bathtub, which they were able to prove it was a homicide years later. I think he went to jail for that one. I don't know if they charged him with the second homicide. So then there's another city that turns up in this book called Palatine Police, and I'm thinking about that. And then I remembered late 80s, early 90s, you had this cop from Palatine Police. I think he was married to another cop, female cop. And what he was doing was he was robbing banks in surrounding areas. And then eventually, like anything else, the feds got a hold of him. He gets caught. He gets charged with multiple bank robberies. And then he's being held, I think, in the federal detention center in downtown Chicago. And during one of his court hearings, either someone smuggled a gun in, or he was able to get a handcuff key and pull a gun from a U.S. Marshal or a court officer, and tries to escape. And there's a gun battle in the courthouse. I think he killed a couple of cops or correction officers, and then ultimately this cop from Palatine PD is killed. So I just find it ironic that all these little small police departments have these Hall of Famers, bad guys, and just no one was doing anything about it. So the book, again, is called Murder in the Fox Valley, the true story of serial killer Bruce Lindahl. It's an interesting read. The guy, Jim Writing's a nice guy. He's a reporter. The book it reads like a police report. For me, I found it very easy reading. I thought it was very interesting. A nice guy. I apologize that I couldn't, get him on the show, but we just had too many technical difficulties, so I just kind of had to wing it. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Staten Island, New York, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Pratt, Kansas, Oswego, Illinois, Columbus, Indiana, Sparta, Wisconsin, and of course, Downers Grove, Illinois. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background, please drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50 if you'd like to be a guest on the show. If you enjoy the content, go to my Amazon author page. Just type in my name, Vic Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my NYPD books for free. Again, they're all $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. They're available on Amazon, including NYPD, Presumption and Dysfunction. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like and subscribe button. And thank you again, everyone, and I will have another episode out next week. Take care.